Hello Facebook, my name is Kara and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics and how that all relates to literacy skills and just what does that mean for you, for your child, for their reading skills. Hello Ellie. So you might be wondering, why is this important? Hello Allie. Why is phonological, phonemic, and phonics, why are those skills all important for my child? It's because literacy is at the heart of almost all of academia for our kids. So literacy doesn't just incorporate the reading. So when you hear the word literacy, many parents might think, oh, that just means being able to read. But literacy is actually more than that, because your infant, your young child who just can understand what looking at a picture means, that's a part of literacy. Your young child who's just turning a page in a book, that's a part of literacy. And then the child who is starting to recognize words or understand that there are words and pictures on the page, that's also part of literacy. So the take-home message is that literacy skills are from birth until school starts, and there's so many things that we can be doing to enhance the literacy skills of our young children. And what we do know is that there's research out there that shows us that when we prepare our kids and work on these phonological awareness skills, these phonemic awareness skills, and then the phonics skills, that they are going to have much more success when it comes to their literacy skills in school. So parents can obviously play a big role in that, right? Just reading to your children, talking about pictures, all of these things. It's not just the reading, it's the speaking, it's the writing. All of these skills are so important. So another question that I've had parents ask me is, as a teacher is going to have a slightly different standpoint. Maybe their teacher will come to them about a concern for their child, and the parent just doesn't really understand the problem. So I've heard teachers saying that, kids cannot blend their words together, or they just can't figure out their rhyming words, or they can't count the syllables in a word, whether you're clapping or you're trying to count them out or another way, or they're just trying to change a word, they're trying to add sounds to a word and make it into a new word. And some parents might not understand how important that is to our literacy skills. So that is something that the teacher might see, and they might be able to recognize, okay, this child either might have poor phonological skills, phonemic skills, poor phonics, all of those things. So that can sometimes be the stepping point to looking further into this and seeing what the next step is to help your child with their literacy skills. So I will put a couple links in the comments after this video, but I will reference this lovely woman named Judy Montgomery. She's a speech-language pathologist. She, I think, is in California, and she's been working for many, many years, and she specializes in literacy and language development for children of all developmental abilities. So Judy Montgomery has developed this really cool chart. You're not going to be able to read it because it's going to be backwards. It's called Funnel Towards Phonics. But I wanted to show you the general idea of it because I'm going to kind of be talking about it as a funnel. And so all of these letters up here is kind of like the input, the information that the children are receiving. So when we think about, how do our speaking and our listening skills, how do those interact to then become important for reading, that's what I'm going to talk about, okay? So phonological processing is the top of this little funnel. It's the very top. This is where all these letters look kind of jumbled at the top. So thinking about all the input that your children are receiving, all the words that they're hearing, all of the sounds, all the songs and things that they're hearing from day to day, that is their phonological processing. That's kind of the basic level that we want to achieve first to then build on for good literacy skills. So if a child hasn't been exposed to lots of songs and rhymes and pictures and all of those things, they're gonna have a weakness with this ability. So this phonological processing part is kind of the first part, right? And then the second step to that is what's called phonological awareness. So again, in this funnel, the first part, we want to be successful with that phonological processing, so hearing all those words, speaking, understanding words. The next step is going to be what's called phonological awareness. And that is going to refer to just manipulating the sounds of spoken language, but without print. So I had mentioned teachers earlier, and the hard thing in a school setting is that teachers are really big into what's called the phonics. They want your children to know the letters and the sounds that they make. They want to be able to spell them. They want to be able to read them. But there's so much more that happens and that is necessary before you get to that phonics point, okay? So that phonological awareness, it's just knowing these spoken sounds and words, but not with the print. So in order to see if your child has a difficulty with phonological awareness, you can't use any words, or any print, I mean. You can't use any books that have the words actually printed, because that's not going to focus on that particular skill. So I'm going to give you some examples. So a child that can reproduce either visual or auditory or motor patterns, those are all tasks that are involved in developing phonological awareness. So even just being able to reproduce these movements or reproduce a word, let's say you say a word, I can, or a phrase, I can, and you want them to then repeat it, they're reproducing it. Or if they're reproducing something auditorily, so maybe it's like a rhythm. All of those things are going to intertwine and be a part of that phonological awareness. They might be able to rhyme and chant, so they'll hear a song and rhyme and chant along with you, or they might be able to say it with you. Sometimes they can imitate a whole sentence, so that's also part of phonological awareness. So if you say, it's my turn, and then they can imitate, it's my turn, that's a part of that phonological awareness. Just knowing and counting words can be another part of this task, or this skill rather. So like if you would give them a sentence like, it's hot today, or let's not do it. Sorry, that's a bad example. How about, I can go to school? Let's do a longer one. So just being able to say, how many words are there? I can go to school. Giving you how many there are and knowing that each word that you said is separated by that pause. Just that skill is going to be another part of that phonological awareness. And then knowing and counting syllables. The syllables can get a little trickier because it's not just the words, it's more detailed than that, because many words can have more than one syllable. We don't speak in just one syllable words. So counting their syllables. So when I was in a school setting before I came to the Walker Sketchwrite Clinic, we used this program, this Funnel Towards Phonics, and it had a fun little activity of like counting syllables by using your body parts. So I would say, let's say my last name, Daymen, and we were trying to count the syllables in my last name. We would say, Daymen. Oh, there's 1, 2. So my first name would be the same thing, Kara, Kara. Now if we do the word elephant, Ella, and then you go down to your hips, fint. And you actually get really creative with beyond that, what body part, your hips, your knees, your toes. Kids love that, kind of getting silly with it. But it gives them another way to count those syllables, those parts of those words. And again, that's all of that phonological awareness, those skills. So we mentioned that just the speaking and the listening was that first piece of all that information coming into your kiddo and that processing that they are trying to achieve. And then we have this phonological awareness that we just talked about. The next and more advanced skill then would be the phonemic awareness. So we're still not yet at what's called phonics, where the teachers are all working. All your teachers in your classrooms, they are really hitting hard those phonics skills. I'll give some of them credit. There are teachers who do know a little bit more about the phonemic and the phonological, but our field, the speech and language therapy field, is we're really in depth with all of this because we do so much of the speaking portion of it. So phonemic awareness is really more of isolating those sounds in our language. So a phoneme is the smallest piece of a sound in our language. So for example, there are 44 phonemes in the English language. That's a lot of sounds to make up all of these different words. So if you would ask your child to hear or count the phonemes in a word, that would be an example of something that they're working on, their phonemic awareness. So let me give you an example. Let's say the word cat, and you want them to count the sounds in the word. We're not necessarily counting letters. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different between the number of letters and the number of sounds. But how many sounds are in that word, cat? So you'd have to kind of break it up in your mind, break it down, I guess. K, that's one sound. A, that's another sound. T, that's another sound. Okay, there's 3 sounds. But then when you have a sound like, or a word like math, let's go with math. How many sounds, not letters, how many sounds are in the word math? So if you just think the sounds, you're not thinking the print, right? You're not spelling the word. You're just thinking of the sounds in that word. A, so there's 3 sounds in that word, 3 phonemes, but there's actually 4 letters. We all know how to spell math, right? M-A-T-H. So that's an example of a skill that might not be directly taught to some kiddos out there who are struggling with reading, but this phonemic awareness, what I'm starting to talk about, is really important to build on those literacy skills, so we'll get to that. Just repeating different sounds, being able to imitate those sounds. Again, it's a lot of what we do in therapy. And then there's other skills like segmenting or even blending. So you might have a teacher or a therapist that asks your child, you know, how can you, let's see, can you, if I say the word cat, sorry, I'm stuck on that word for some reason. If I say the word cat, how can you break it down and tell me each of the sounds? So it's what I just did with you, but if you ask your child to tell you which sounds are in that word, can you say it slowly? So then you would want them to be able to say, well, there's k, that's the first sound, a, and then the third sound is t. So the other reverse of that would be blending the word. If I present the word to the child and I just present it with sound by sound, so present the phonemes, then they would have to tell me what word is that. So like if we would say f, I, sh, those are the 3 sounds in the word. Again, I'm not using print. Can you then blend those words in your mind, or if you have to speak it, say it, speak it to figure it out, what is that word? Fish. So that's just another example of phonemic awareness, or blending those words. Even just like reversing and adding different sounds and words. There's so many different ways that you can do that with all of the different words in our language. So the other piece of phonemic awareness that's important is just recognizing that letters and sounds are not the same thing, right? You have to be able to know that concept before you can segment and blend and add sounds to different words. Another example might be of adding would be, you know, what is the word, sorry, I thought of the wrong example. What is the word, or what word can you make from nake if you add an s to the beginning? And nake is not a real word. That's a really bad example. It would be snake. But recognizing that those letters are different than sounds. I've worked with some kiddos in the past that if I ask what sound is it, they give me the letter name. You know, what sound? Maybe we're working on L, you know, and the word is lion. What sound do you hear at the beginning? And they answer L. Well, that's the letter name, but what is the sound that L makes? It might not be, it's not going to sound the same as the letter name of it. So just that concept can be tricky for some kids. And then just sensing a pattern of how sounds can be represented by letters is also another example of phonemic awareness. So maybe this might be pre-spelling, right? So you give a child a word and they're trying to use some sort of invented spelling perhaps in school. And this is often encouraged, you know, in kindergarten, where the child is trying to sound it out. They're trying to think of that pattern as they've heard it in the sound. They're just using those auditory skills and the phonemic awareness skills to then try to invent the spelling of that word. So that's just another example of those phonemic awareness skills. So the last piece of that funnel, when you're looking at this funnel, is this phonics thing and the phonics skill, and then down at the bottom, that is going to lead to language and reading skills, right? So in the classroom, a lot of teachers are going to be hitting these phonics skills really hard. This is explicitly teaching the code for the sounds and the sound symbol correspondence, rather, but with the print. So all of these other examples that I gave you were not involving print yet. But now with phonics, that's when we introduce the actual letters. That does not mean that you're not going to talk about those things before your child is ready to actually practice the phonics skills, because that's how we know that we're developing them and moving them towards that process. You can still involve print, but you might not be explicitly working with the print until they are ready for this point. So teaching that the letters represent the different sounds, that's part of that phonics. Those predictable patterns, like in schools, they'll look at word families. I think they'll talk a lot about with CVC words, consonant, vowel, consonant, or consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, and they'll talk about those different patterns in the words. And then they'll talk about the very frequent consonants. They'll talk about short vowels, long vowels. You might remember some of that from school. Where we're talking about how do you know that the vowel is going to be short or long. There's all sorts of little tricks and rhymes that teachers will use to kind of teach. How do you know how you're going to pronounce that word? That is all represented with phonics skills, right? So when a child is having trouble with any one of these areas, we will probably see difficulty with language and with reading skills. Now, the take-home message is that obviously, the early years, early intervention is going to be huge for your children, but that doesn't mean that if they reach a certain point and they reach kindergarten and they're expected to read, that all hope is lost, right? We know that there's a lot of supports out there for working with your children and developing those literacy skills. And the main message that I want you to take home is that obviously the literacy skills, once they are established, that your child is going to be using those skills for the rest of their educational career. So put a lot of time and effort into the prepping for these literacy skills, right? So this is all stuff that is going to be huge for the long haul, because we talk, we speak, we write, we listen in many different times in our lives and different settings in our lives, at the grocery store. I mean, print is everywhere. So you can be talking about the words that you see on the boxes of the cereal at the grocery store. You can be talking about the letters that you see on the billboards, or that it's a word. I mean, just using all of that great vocabulary and just teaching your children about it, all that awareness, all of those examples and opportunities that your children are going to be a part of, all of that is going to lead into those literacy skills. So if you have any questions about phonological, phonemic awareness, literacy skills, anything like that, absolutely put them in the comments. I'm going to attach a couple links to just other ways that you can help your child with their either phonological, their phonemic, or their phonics skills. And obviously if you have a concern for speech and language, but specifically the sounds in the words, then you can come see us. We always have free screenings every week at multiple locations, and we will do our best to help you out. So if you have, sorry, I had a thought and then I lost it. Have a good week, or have a good month rather, and we will be back in March. We'll be back in April for another live video. Thank you, everybody.